people, so in this video I'm going to be sharing a few tips and tricks that can help you deal with quote-unquote difficult patients. So from what I've seen so far, which isn't necessarily that much technically speaking since I'm barely just starting my career path, but from what I've seen so far, patients are labeled difficult in two similar but separate contexts. The first is if they are refusing to listen to the physician's recommendations or suggestions. And the second is if they're very emotionally charged and it's very difficult to communicate with them or to appease them and to take steps to be able to deal with the situation. And I feel like both of these situations are situations that do happen quite commonly actually, and that we need to be able to understand how to skillfully deal with these types of situations. And I don't think that labeling these patients as difficult helps at all, but this is just my take on it. So not too long ago we had a patient in the emergency room who could have potentially had a very serious problem, and he refused any further investigations, and he demanded every single time to have at least 24 hours to think about it, which struck me as very strange at first because first of all 24 hours seems like a rather arbitrary number, and there must be something underlying this reason that he clearly wasn't telling us. And so since the ER was so busy, we had to go deal with some other cases and work on those. And then eventually we had to come back to this gentleman, and after a little bit more probing, we came to realize that the reason why he was refusing further investigations was because he wanted to spend the night in the emergency room because he had nowhere to stay that night. I don't think he was necessarily homeless. He said that he had been with somebody and they'd separated, and therefore that's why he can't have a place tonight, and that he just didn't want to leave the emergency room. And that he was afraid that if he did have the investigations, that if they were negative, they would let him go. And so that's why he was refusing the investigations and was asking for more time to think about it. Which was actually very sad when we realized that that was actually the problem that we had at hand. And what's worse is that he refused to see social workers, so I'm not entirely sure what we could have really done for that patient if he was refusing any help. And so what eventually happened was that we convinced him that you could spend the night in the waiting room even if the results were not positive, because if they were positive he would have needed to stay at the emergency room in the emergency anyway. So that was a little bit of a sad story and sort of a wake-up call to me. Apparently this happens more often than you would think in a lot of emergency rooms in the city that I live in, and it's just it's very sad, and I wish that there was something more that we could have done. Yeah. So all this to say that sometimes you just need to take the time to very calmly and strategically speak with your patient in a manner that allows them to trust you enough for them to be able to tell you what is really bothering them and what they're really going through, because only then can you at least try to take steps to help them. So that was the first anecdote that I wanted to share with you. Another was that we had a simulated exam not too long ago, and one of the stations gave me some really great feedback, and what the physician then told me was that sometimes all it really takes from you is to look at your patient and say, and acknowledge what they're feeling. You know, just look at them and say, you're sad, or you're angry, or you're frustrated, you know, or you're afraid. And oftentimes the underlying emotion for a lot of the very extreme reactions that you can see is that they're really scared. They're scared that their loved one is slipping between their fingers and there's nothing that they can do. They are scared that something might happen to them. They are scared of the responsibility that they might be leaving behind if something should happen to them. You know, a lot of the underlying very strong emotions that are portrayed to us and that you see often, especially in the emergency room setting, for example, is because people are just afraid. And sometimes you just need to look at them and say, you are feeling this emotion. And what that does is that it helps them understand the fact that you understand what they are trying to communicate with you in a perhaps indirect way. And once they understand that you understand what they're feeling, they're able to sort of calm down a little bit, because what the emotion that they're trying to convey to you has been conveyed, and they understand that. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to sort of tease out the details of what exactly is underlying that problem. And usually it's these details that help you do your job properly. It's these details that give you the information that you need to be able to help this patient and to be able to diagnose this patient or to keep them in contact with the services that they need. These were two little stories or anecdotes that I hope will give you a little bit more insight and help into learning how to communicate with patients that are often labeled as difficult. I hope this was useful. If you did find this useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget to also check out my blog, medicineandveil.com. There's lots of great material on there. And until next time, salam.